I'm Tony Shepard, 30 years tracking organized retail crime and working major busts.
And I'm Johnny Custer, 30 years turning loss prevention into a profit-driving powerhouse with analytics and strategy.
Every episode, we break down the latest in retail risk, security, and total loss prevention. What's real, what's hype, and what's coming next.
And yeah, we'll probably have some fun along the way.
Welcome to It's Your Loss with Tony and Johnny. Retail crime, retail loss, the future of loss prevention. All right. Welcome to another episode of It's Your Loss with Tony and Johnny. My name is Tony Shepard, and I'd like to introduce Johnny Custer, my co-host here. Say hello, Johnny.
Hey, Tony.
All right.
Hey,
and
Tony.
I'm excited for our guest today, Dave Thompson. Unless you've been under a rock, the now CEO of Wicklander-Zulawski. We'll definitely get into that certainly later. But Dave, how you doing?
Well, I was doing good until I just saw you at a Houston Texans mug intentionally.
That wasn't intentional, but I do have a question I'm going to ask you later. We'll get to that. Trust me, I've got a question coming. I noticed you have a Buffalo Bills helmet there. Is that why you're not in a good mood, Dave?
I feel great all the time. I'm a loyal guy.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
It must be nice for people to be able to talk about their football teams. Like sometimes people win games and stuff. I don't.
You're right. Browns fan, Dave. Right. He doesn't know. He Browns.
I understand. Yeah.
So
you had a quarterback for
nothing
every day of the week last year, except for Sundays.
We've had a quarterback for every day of the year for the past 22 years.
Yeah.
Nice. Hey, so what I would like to get started with, typically we like to obviously, again, I think a lot of people in the industry, certainly Dave, know who you are, obviously your background, but you were an LP, right? Before you came to Wicklander. I'm assuming you may have done some other things. So just want to start out with, how did you end up where you are now? CEO of Wicklander-Zulawski, kind of the path to how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Kind of probably like everybody that's answered this question on your podcast is by accident. It seems like everybody kind of found this industry in that way, which is what's so cool about this industry, right? There's so many transferable skill sets that people in loss prevention or asset protection either came from or go to afterwards. But yeah, I spent majority of my time in the field, so I won't go through the whole agenda of my career, but I did start catching shoplifters back at the Sears Kmart days. So I did that. I did the Army thing, went to do the public sector thing for a little bit and went to New York State Police and then left and came back to do what I love to do, which is training, and had the really cool opportunity to work for UZ, which I always thought like, there's no way I'm going to be able to work for this organization. You know, I was trained by the team, which was really cool, and then be able to come on board and train for them. And then I've been there now for it'll be 12 years in June this year. It's just been a wild ride over the last decade, and really been blessed to just meet so many cool people around the world that have been impacted by the organization. So really cool path to be a part of. And I don't know, I've learned just say yes and figure it out later is a little bit of my probably a problem, I would say. Problem setting boundaries, I think, but figure it out.
Yeah, it depends on who you ask, probably. Go ahead, Johnny.
You started with Sears and Kmart. So I grew up in the Kmart world too. Is it ironic? I feel it's a little ironic to me because the internal theft interview and interrogation process for Sears and Kmart was a lot different than most other retailers, right? You had to have 3 hits. You had to have all of them on video before you could sit somebody down. And by that time, there's no interview skill involved with that. So have you looked back on that and kind of thought that didn't really help my development much?
Oh man, I look back all the time. I've screwed up more times than I can think about. And kind of a funny example, I guess, when I first worked there, I wasn't doing interviews just yet, but I was supposed to catch shoplifters. And I was in a store that super high shrink. I saw shoplifters all the time. I caught 0 in like my first 6 months, and I saw it, but I didn't apprehend anybody because I was never really fully trained on what to do if it goes sideways. Like I knew here's what you do when you apprehend somebody, everything goes by the book. But what happens if it's a juvenile, if they fight, if they have, all the crazy stuff. And I still remember this today because I prevented myself from actually doing the job because I didn't feel like I was trained for all the what ifs. And so I take that still today in a training course. If you're going to do an interview, an investigation, don't go into that conversation without knowing like what are all the contingencies if something goes sideways. And as leaders, if you don't set your team up for that, they're gonna just prevent themselves from ever being in that position in the first place, which is what I did. So yeah, those were the days I've heard the Johnny and Tony stories. Like those are the days that we probably should have put in writing about some of the cases we got involved in back then.
Yeah, it's funny. The first apprehension that I ever made, I went outside and they ran. And I stood there like, do I chase? Do I
Right.
tackle? What do I
Go
do? I
stretch
haven't been
first.
trained on
Right.
this.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, there's a
my
difference.
first
So I chased.
attempted apprehension, I think you guys have all heard the story. First attempted apprehension, guy pulled a Bowie knife on me right on Michigan Highway in Dearborn, Michigan. First one. So to your point, Dave, not trained for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
Well,
I did not react well. I still tried to make the apprehension. There was a car involved. I got drugged, etc. I think we covered it on another podcast, but
yeah.
probably not what I should have done. Right.
Right.
To your point, was not planning for the what if situation.
I spent a little time in Dearborn, Tony. You're lucky it was only a Bowie knife.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do you find the way that you approach the training differs on whether or not it's a company that's heavily dependent on cameras, or a company that has no cameras and they're heavily dependent on data, or one that's heavily dependent on cold interviews? Do you have to kind of alter your strategy, or is it kind of a one size fits all?
That's a good question. So much has changed in the last 5 to 10 years from what we train and what the evidence, what research supports on how you should conduct evidence-based interviewing. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to interviewing, first of all, and that's changed a lot. When you think about different clients, and whether even outside of retail, but when you look at different levels of evidence they might have, the maybe quality or experience of the interviewer, are they conducting interviews in person? Are they doing it over the phone? Are they doing it remotely? You require subject matter expertise? Like, do we got some kind of crazy financial crime or IT fraud, or do we have somebody just stealing cash out of a register? And what's the amount of evidence they have? And so the type of method applied might be different, right? You might have kind of the strategic use of evidence where you're withholding evidence to determine, hey, is this a training issue? Do we have enough evidence to be sure this person actually did something wrong with intent? Or we've got a lot of investigators in our field now that are doing more employee relations type investigations. So, you've got kind of just, I got 5 different people telling me different stories and I got to assess credibility. I'm not going in and accusing 5 people and hoping somebody confesses. We're using more of maybe a cognitive interview approach, or maybe even trauma informed if it's after a critical incident. So yeah, what's one thing that I think is just so cool about our team and our instructors, they're all practitioners. They've all come from the field, so they've all conducted real interviews. And so when we go work with a client, it's understanding, hey, what cases are you dealing with? Like, what struggles do you have? What's your company culture like? And then making sure our principles are still in place, but that it's customized to kind of their culture, their company, and their objectives.
Before we move on any further, I know I joked around in the beginning that, for those under a rock, right? But for those under a rock, right, let's be clear. Why don't we talk a little bit about what, Wicklander-Zulawski, just in case there's anyone listening that's not familiar. You tell
Speaking of
them
under a rock,
what your company does.
Yeah, I mean, we were founded in 1982, which is crazy now. We were talking, John and I talking a little bit about this beforehand. I just found a schedule I posted on LinkedIn from 1990 where you had to fax in your registration form. So Doug Wicklander and Dave Zulawski founded this organization back at that time, and primarily we're both a training company and an investigative firm. So we're really helping with a lot of companies and law enforcement with investigations. Fast forward 40 plus years, a lot of changes, a lot of evolution in what we provide and how we provide it. But ultimately, if somebody's having a conversation that could have a consequence associated with it, we provide training on how to do it the right way. So whether that's, loss prevention, is we're talking a lot about here, but a loss prevention or fraud kind of professionals talking to somebody about theft, fraud, or some type of like misappropriation of funds, whatever it is, we train on how do you conduct those conversations in a non-confrontational, evidence-based way. That's grown over the last decade or so, that now it's human resources, employee relations, having difficult conversations about kind of employee to employee issues, de-escalation training, done a lot of sales negotiation training. Anybody, again, that has to have just a difficult conversation, even hiring somebody, firing somebody, an exit interview.
Tony, I was talking to Dave a little bit before we started recording. Can you think of, in your experience, any solution provider that is as widely accepted as Wicklander-Zulawski?
Yeah, no, I don't. I certainly can't think of any right now. If I do, I'll say it before the end. But no, I don't. I mean, again, we grew up with it. For those on the call who don't know, Johnny and I are both CFIs ourselves, right? So we've been through it.
Okay, so just random, we're in an interview. Let's say you have a reasonable amount of evidence. It's a long-term employee, so you're trying to fully develop the admission. What is the most dangerous bias that an investigator can bring into the room with them that sets them up for failure immediately?
Assumption that you know everything, and whether it's presumption of guilt. I mentioned confirmation bias, but think about this really simple. If our already know everything we're about to find out, why are we doing the interview anyway? Right? There's no point. And so, and we've all been guilty of this. This could be an investigative interview. This could be a sales call. This could be a conversation with a friend or whoever it is. If you walk in feeling like you already know the answers, you're not really listening, right? You're not really being curious. And so, I mean, I've been there. I'm sure you guys have been in the same spot where you've walked into an investigation, especially in your example, you got maybe a long-term employee, maybe got a lot of evidence, and you think, okay, this person's definitely responsible for X. First of all, you could be wrong. Your evidence could be wrong. But the other thing is maybe they are responsible for X, and you're so focused on that that you don't ask about Y or Z, right? You're kind of siloed. Maybe you don't learn, I know you guys have had a lot of experience with organized retail crime. You talk about these more complex investigations. If you're so focused on the one thing you think you know about, you're not asking wide enough scoped questions, you may not realize that they're also in collusion with another employee or with an external source or with something else. And so, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And
Sorry to interrupt, Johnny. I'm going to embarrass myself here. I don't think I've brought this one up before, but it was when I was leaving traditional LP to go to ORC, there was somebody that was taking my place, and that person came with me. Like for a couple of weeks, we traveled together, et cetera, and we went to go interview this employee, and I think he was doing price verifies or something, to give stuff away, or it was an obvious one. I had video. I did not do it. I was Mr. Confident, of course I'm already thinking about my future career in ORC. I'm not. And I went into that room with this brand new person. Now, he had a ton of experience, thankfully, from his prior company, and it probably was actually in the, I think it was the Air Force intelligence or something. But anyway, we come in this room, and this kid just was not admitting to anything. And I was not prepared for that because I was overly confident. I had not done my homework. And this other person, I'm not going to say who it was, but literally had to how embarrassing is that? Think about that. The guy who's take over my interview, right? He literally had to take over my interview. That was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, actually, now that I think about it. I don't know why I just said that and it's recorded. But anyway, just wanted to share that because, again, I think that's one thing too is that overconfidence, right? Talk about the technology and everything where you just and you could be overconfident in your interviewing ability. I've interviewed, I don't even know how many. I was working for companies, we didn't have cameras, we didn't have anything. That's all you did basically was interview folks, right? So,
Well, I think
yeah.
it's especially tough when you're in there and you're trying to show off too, right? You got this trainee or this new person that you're trying to make an impression on, and I've done it where I've just completely fumbled and had to have some kind of recovery by someone else.
Even what you just said too, like this overconfidence, or sometimes there's pressure on interviewers. There's often pressure, right? And in the private sector, it could be from the boss. I remember I was fearful. Am I going to call my boss and say, I did the interview, I didn't get anything, right? Even in the law enforcement space, these professionals have to not only deal with maybe the boss or the prosecutor, but also there's a victim that they want to represent. If it's a big case, there's media pressure that you have to solve this case, like what's going on. And so sometimes that pressure forces investigators into a position where they will be overconfident or coercive just to try to get to the end that they need to get to. But yeah, man, if you're a leader out there listening, be aware of that because you're putting that pressure on your team sometimes that could lead to bad results because you're so focused on an admission versus the process.
Dave, you mentioned the word curious a little while ago, and what's really dawning on me more than anything else out of these podcast sessions we're having, we're interviewing some really great, some legendary leaders. And our last episode, we had a guy by the name of King Rogers on. Perhaps you've heard of him.
Yeah.
King, the one bit of advice that he said would be pertinent for everyone partaking in this industry is be curious. Is that something, because you mentioned that walk into the interview curious, and that sets you up to be a little bit more humble. Is that something that you would recommend as kind of a best practice for everyone as they move forward?
I love it. I've kind of tried to live my life that way and probably wasn't great at that in the beginning. And that's something that whether it's inside an interview or it's as a leader, it's as a friend, whatever it might be, but being, Ted Lasso, one of my favorite shows, and he used the quote of "Be curious, not judgmental," and it's the same concept of conducting an interview. Sometimes you might, if you're judgmental and you just assume, all right, this person did this because of whatever they're disgruntled at the company, they're struggling with money or whatever it might be. If you're curious, first of all, you're going to approach it in a more empathetic way. You might get more information, and you might also identify this person's got some other stuff going on that maybe we should be helping with. Right? We've got loss prevention, asset protection. It's people are our most important asset. And you never know what somebody's going through on your team. And so I think being open-minded and being curious makes us all better leaders, better people, and it gets us more information. So yeah, I love that takeaway. It's a good one.
Here's a quick one. What is the one habit or behavior that you would like interviewers to completely stop doing and never do again?
Lying. Stop lying.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think so. My first response was going to be the behavioral stuff, but we already covered that. So I want to get away from this, liar, liar, pants on fire philosophy, but lying, right? I mean, the Supreme Court, Frazier versus Cupp, 1969, allows investigators to lie about evidence to an extent, right? That's why you could say, law enforcement could say, we've got fingerprints when they don't, or we've got a witness when they don't. I don't think it's the right way to do it. The research shows that it's known as the false evidence ploy, but using that tactic has a high correlation to either false or unreliable confessions. And if you lie, it's also eventually going to come out at some point, and it's going to hurt your credibility, your organization's credibility, your department. And at the end of the day, we're asking people to tell us the truth. And I think honesty is reciprocal. So when you start to lie and create that kind of as your baseline is going to be a problem. So yeah, stop lying. We've had some legislative movement in that direction. We've got, I think now 11 states that have actually kind of over top of the Supreme Court ruling, it has a custodial interrogation with a juvenile in 11 different states now, and they lie about evidence. That confession is presumed inadmissible. And there's different kind of measures depending on the state. But that means if they say, hey, we've got fingerprints and they don't, and it's a juvenile in custody during that conversation, they can't use that confession anymore. So movement away from it. But if you're listening, stop lying about your evidence.
So if I'm in the middle of an interview and I'm trying to develop the admission and I pull the folder off the table and I start scrolling through it to hint that, well, this is all the evidence I have, and really it's just a bunch of takeout menus, would that be lying, or is
Stay
that
away
just
from it. And especially what happens when they notice it's a takeout menu or when you're wrong, right?
I'm an expert at not passing the fact that it's a takeout menu. So
yeah.
that's my one strength.
I think to expand on that, I think it's, one of again, what the research shows is that one of the leading reasons people actually do confess is the perception of evidence strength. So when people feel like what they did, they are more likely to confess, which is why lying is, and I say effective in air quotes, is effective in getting people to give you information. The problem is sometimes it's not truthful information. Yeah. You can still talk about, here's how we do an investigation. Here's the tools and resources that we use. You can still build credibility, but it's this kind of like, hey, we have this, when that does not exist, that could be a problem. Or say we've got camera footage, but they know that they cut the power to the cameras an hour before they committed whatever the act was. Now they know you're full of garbage, right? And so that's, from a strategic standpoint, something to be careful of. But yeah, stop lying would be my one takeaway.
I got one more, and this one's selfish, and it may put you on the spot a little bit. There are scenarios in my past and in all of our past where we have to go in and essentially take out an entire store. And in order to do it properly, we've got to do them all in one day. Doing a proper interview takes a lot out of you. How do you coach people in your classes that have to do 4, 5 interviews in a day to ensure that that fourth and fifth is as strong and as professional as the first ones? Because I got to be honest with you, early in my career, by the time that fourth one and fifth one came around, I'm just throwing a pad of paper on the table saying, here, just sign it.
Yeah, I had that. So that's a good point, especially for some of these investigators that cover large geographic areas and they're kind of solo. Early in my WZ career, we got hired to go do an investigation, and I had to go to, I think I was in New York City area, if I remember. It doesn't matter, but it was at a restaurant bar area, and they had high amount of cash loss. And anybody that's worked in that kind of field, if one person is stealing, there's a high likelihood that more are stealing. And it's been going on for a while. And I remember I told the client, I said, we got to be careful. They had me interviewing like 3 or 4 bartenders. And I said, again, contingency planning, we need to be prepared that if I interview those 3 bartenders, first of all, they all might be stealing. They might tell us that 10 other people are stealing, and that the cook is stealing, and that the host is stealing. And if everybody is stealing, you can't open the bar tomorrow because nobody's there to work. And so part of that is just from an operational standpoint, right? I think taking a partner with your operators, because there's nothing more that'll tick off your operators, and all of a sudden you went in and terminated half of their store and now you're losing revenue the next day. So partnering is important. From the point of your question, the structure of an interview is important. And it doesn't mean you have to use, steps 1 through whatever for every single interview. But having objectives of every conversation, I always did, because I did the same thing where I'm exhausted at the end of the day, and especially doing multiple interviews, in my folder, if you still have folders now, but in my whatever, your electronic tablet, whatever people are using. But I had a cover sheet that would just have, here are the main 5 objectives of things I want to ask about, things I want to accomplish in that conversation. Because I've had plenty of interviews where I finished, I was exhausted, mentally drained, and left the interview and thought, damn it, I never asked them about this, or I forgot that, or I didn't get the statement. So I just always had a cheat sheet at the front. So I knew, here's my 5 topics, not a script of questions, but topics that I want to make sure I cover. That kind of kept me fresh. And then second is, if having a secondary interviewer, even if they're not in person or witness or whatever, note taker, even if they can be on the phone because you don't have the capacity to have 2 people there, but having somebody that can be there to check out those gaps, like you two guys both hosting a podcast. If Johnny, if you're asking me a question, Tony doesn't know what the hell I'm saying, but he can think about his next question, right? And it helps you in those mental, like, reduce your cognitive load a little bit. So having somebody that can help with that capacity, I think.
Plus, I mean, let's be honest, podcasts that have 2 hosts are way better than podcasts that only have 1.
I guess so. Yeah, that's a good point.
The
He
example
told
you
us.
just gave me, Dave, was with the notes or whatever. You gave me another story to tell, by the way. Thank you again. Yeah, I got another one now. I'll put on LinkedIn. But that's how I would go into meetings with agencies, especially federal agencies and federal prosecutors. Is I would have like the key points that I was the most concerned about that I wanted to get across, and I wouldn't just go in there like bullet points, because try to tell law enforcement or a federal prosecutor how they should do their job is not going to end well. But if you wait until it's the right moment to bring those things up, but again, otherwise I would always forget. So I just had it there in front of me, so I know not to forget any of these key points that I want to make sure that I cover.
It's all preparation, right? The 3 of us, I'm sure, have gone into plenty of interviews and we've winged it. That's not the way to do it, right? It's so ThinkLP, right? When you have a case management system and you have information ready to go, using that as a guideline for every interview before you walk in. So you can say, all right, here's the categories of things I need to make sure that I ask about, right? Here's the blanks that need to be filled in. I think that helps you keep that structure. When you walk in with just your folder with takeout menus and you're just relying on your ability to navigate the conversation, I think that's when we get lazy at the end of the day. And I've been there for sure.
I do want to make sure that we touch on the partnership, right? That we have. Obviously, ThinkLP just mentioned, right? We're case management. We do some other things as well, certainly audit, analytics, reporting, things of that nature. But, case management is obviously how we started, right? That's our core. And certainly there's different types of cases. You brought some up, right? There's child investigations, there's, theft investigations, whether internal, external, et cetera. And then obviously your company, certainly as we've mentioned, right, best in class from an interviewing standpoint. And so we've talked a lot, and now we have handlers to help us. So I think maybe things will progress now, right? So we had a lot of initial conversations, but now we've got handlers, other people involved to make sure we move along. But we've discussed some things that we can do together, right? And I just want to touch on a few of those things. Let me start with this question. What excites you about that partnership between WZ and ThinkLP?
I think it goes back to the core of who WZ is building that personal relationship with the practitioner in the field. And I go back to what the first story I shared when I worked and didn't know what the heck I was doing. We put these practitioners out there, and everybody that's apprehending somebody or conducting an interview, they're entering in a case, right? And that's kind of their first interaction with this system, right? From a consistency standpoint. And so for me, what excites me is now making sure that we're supporting every one of those users with some type of suggestions or tips on, here are some better ways to ask some questions. Or, hey, if you're conducting an ORC interview and you're entering in your case, here's some helpful guidelines. And so for me, it's providing support to the field, consistency across organizations. And at the end of the day, they're able to leverage the data that they already have in the system, especially looking at like a complex investigation where they can see all these pieces moving together. All these investigations and the technology that's out there doesn't do much if you can't interview somebody. But if you can't interview somebody the right way without leveraging all the data and the preparation in the first hand. So to me, it's just, what excites me is the support to the field.
Yeah, I think we touched on earlier, right, that people are relying on technology, right? And certainly ThinkLP is a technology company, so we're obviously helping them with their investigations. But I was also brought up the point earlier about a lot of folks that don't necessarily have an investigative background, right? So maybe they don't have a lot like the 3 of us. Think about it. On this call, all started out catching shoplifters, all 3 of us, right?
Right.
Then we did internal investigations, right? Like we grew up in that industry. Now you have somebody who came from something totally different, and now it's their first month on the job, their second month on the job, and they're being asked to conduct these investigations, right? So our software can obviously tell, like the flow, if you will, right? But I think to your point, the interviewing aspect, right? Or even the flow, right? Even the suggestions on here's the things you should, heck, even suggestions on how to set up the room. I think there's people that don't know that, quite frankly, right? Maybe they haven't been through WC, right? And I think that's great information to have, and to have it available, right, immediately while you're doing the investigation, like at your fingertips, right? Literally have it on your phone, right? Through the software. Like, I think there's huge advantages to that, especially for some of the folks that are newer, but even the folks that have been around.
Yeah, and consistency to that point, consistency from if I'm a decision maker, if I'm a leader in the field and I'm gonna put people through the WZ course and spend money on their training and their education, but it's been 2 or 3 years since I've gone through the course. I want to make sure that they realize, hey, this still like it lives and breathes in everything that we do. So let's be consistent with the foundation of the training. And so I think that's really important. Too many people, and I've done the same. You go to a training course and it's great, but there's no reinforcement of it afterwards. There's no reminders of it to retain that knowledge. So I think that helps in the same breath.
One of the things, so obviously, Wicklander-Zulawski has been a lot of changes, right? You just became the CEO. I do want to give you an opportunity to touch on anything. I've been on some recent webinars, certainly, about some of the changes. There's certain a lot of, marketing stuff out there talking about it. But for those who don't know, anything you want to touch on in reference to the changes that are coming with WZ?
And Dave, before you answer, let me add to that too, real quick, because I poked a little fun at your podcast, but let's be honest, your podcast is tremendously successful. And while we're typically trying to stay within the industry, you've really broadened your horizons and are starting to include national news stories and famous figures and things of that nature. So while you're talking about your future plans with WZ, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the podcast and kind of what your plans are there as well.
Sure, cool. Yeah, I mean, podcast. I don't know what I was doing, right? The beginning of to kick that off was again, like I said earlier, is I have a habit of saying yes and figuring it out later. I think it's kind of a fun way to live and grow. And the podcast came because we had so many people that just wanted more content, and not everything needs to be a cost to people, where I wanted to make sure this was free and accessible, which it is. And the other thing is, I think you guys, you tell these stories all the time, which are really cool. And now you have this platform. I know both of you on LinkedIn share stories. I have been just lucky to have a really cool network of people I've got to meet based on cases I've worked or conferences or whatever. And I've been telling all these stories of, hey, I talked to this person, I heard this and this cool person, and realized that's selfish. Let me use a podcast platform and I can help share their stories with everybody else. And so that's been really cool. It's funny, as a self-proclaimed expert interviewer, when you get on a podcast, everything changes. And it's like you forget how to ask questions, but it's been really cool. So thank you for that shout out. That's been a fun experience. But on the WZ side, yeah, a lot of really cool changes. One of the first things that we did, which was really exciting for me, is had some internal promotions on the team from a lot of familiar faces that people I'm sure know. I mentioned Chris Norris. We promoted to our VP of WZ International. So from a growth standpoint, you're going to see a lot of movement in that direction from our international footprint. You guys have done the same. Amanda Weaver's been an instructor for us for I think 5 or 6 years now. We promoted her to a senior manager of instructor development. And the reason I want to call that out is recognize Amanda, but also we're putting a greater focus on making sure our instructors are also good students and that we're continuously learning. So we have a monthly continued education program for our instructors, which is really neat. We also promoted Sue Thompson, who's been there, no relation, been at WZ for quite some time, just the backbone of a lot of what we do, to our senior manager of operations, which is great. And then we also just brought on Brian Barlow, who is a part-time instructor for us, now a full-time instructor and professional standards lead. And the reason I called that out, Brian worked at Chicago Police Department for quite some time, led their training department. And his responsibility now is to make sure all of our training continues to meet adult learning science principles, objectives, accreditation standards, those types of things. And so, and we've had a lot more movement internally, which is really exciting. What's next for WZ and CFI? In the last year, we launched CFI Evolved, which both of you are either in the process or about to be, to make sure you've got all your updated training. The certification's been around for 2 decades. I see you're pointing the wrong way on my screen, Tony. One of you guys.
You're pointing at the wall.
Right. Yeah. But the CFI, we took a lot of pride in looking at that curriculum and redeveloping it. led by Joe Wolf, who was working for us during the time. Joe passed, unfortunately, last year, and a lot of credit to Joe for all the work he put into that. And that continues to be just a really cool program to make sure if you have that certified forensic interviewer designation, it's not because you went to a course 20 years ago. It's because you're continuously challenging yourself on what the science of interviewing is bringing. From a WZ standpoint, kind of back to the question, Tony, you asked about what are some of the changes that I really took some pride in. So we're continuously going to change how we deliver content. So you're going to see more scalable solutions in the next couple of years, leveraging technology so it's easier to get training across organizations globally, more transferable education. So it's not just for your loss prevention team anymore. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that have difficult conversations, that are doing due diligence conversations or research on vendors. And there's so much out there that people can use this skill set. So you're going to see a lot more of that coming, more of an enterprise risk approach to some of that. And then lastly, you're going to see more use of technology, more AI in the right way, making sure that we're mitigating risk, but we're also leveraging technology along the way. So some cool stuff that's been coming and on its way in the next couple of years.
Dave, you hit on the whole enterprise piece. So I've had this conversation certainly before, but I've been at ThinkLP now, believe it or not, in May, it's going to be 5 years. I don't know how that happened, but it's almost 5 years I've been here. And just like, WZ, right? You're doing training for all kinds of other groups, right? It's not just folks that are dealing with some type of theft or nefarious behavior, right? It could be all kinds of different things. And so our software, same thing, right? We have HR teams using us, compliance teams using us, other industries using us, to the point where I've said since I've been here for about 6 months that we should change our name. So it hasn't happened yet. I haven't won that battle, but I think we should, because we don't just do LP. So maybe it's just some joint marketing, right? Think LP WZ. We're not just about it. Because I think there is a misnomer for both companies that is the sole focus. So sorry, John, I think you were going to say something. I interrupted you there.
Well, I'll interrupt him too. Because enterprise risk, I mean, even a lot of the leaders that are out there, we've seen loss prevention just grow. So it's not only other verticals, right? Human resources and audit, compliance, legal, et cetera. It's also that leader. And if you're, no matter what, I guess what level you're in, again, saying yes to opportunities to learn more about the business and different aspects will only strengthen your ability to move up that ladder. And there's a lot of loss prevention leaders out there that are now in charge of insurance, find the right insurance vendors and making sure that they're mitigating risk, general liability and workers' comp, and just stuff that's maybe historically been well outside their comfort zone or their knowledge base. But the more you can learn about that, the more value you add for yourself and for your department to secure those positions. And so yeah, that's what we're trying to do, is making sure that we can kind of apply anything that's going to cause potential risk to an organization. We can touch the human aspect of that and try to support those leaders.
Dave, looking at the past 2 minutes of our discussion, you brought up some really great knowledge, some really great hints and helpful anecdotes for some of the people that might be watching. At the risk of ruining all of that, I have a couple of questions for you. So
I should have. Sorry, I have to make a disclaimer. This is not a Long Island iced tea. I just realized that's what it looks like. It is Friday afternoon. This is probably equally as bad. It's a monster. It's a monster.
Should have had bourbon is what I should have had.
Too much. I know it's bad for you, but just want to clarify there's no alcohol in my beverage. Sorry, Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, anybody that knows you, Tony, I'm sure that they wouldn't automatically assume that was a Long Island iced tea.
That's why I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
He'd be dancing if that was the case.
There you go. Exactly. Yes.
So Dave, normally we ask these questions, or especially this one, about one occurrence that happened in their loss prevention career. But the way I look at it, you've had two inherently very different careers, right? You have your in-store careers and even your solution provider career. It's very different because now you're in an instructor capacity and you're helping other people. So if you don't mind, I'm going to make this a two-part question. What's the most embarrassing situation that you can remember being in as an in-store or retail investigator? And then the same question over to the instructor side of the business. What's the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you while you were standing in front of a group of people?
Okay. Let's go with standing in front of a group of people first. I mean, I've had plenty. I've had some of the simple stuff, like the power goes out in the middle of, like my laptop dies in the middle of a keynote with 1,000 people and I got to figure out what to do next, or it's a tornado, or I mispronounced somebody's name. I've had the fly down, of course, during a presentation. So now I'm always like quadruple checking every time I go to the bathroom. Probably twice. I've been pretty good. When I say pretty good, that's a qualifier, which means not always. So I've been pretty good at knowing or remembering when I have a mic hooked up to me.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, I've had two occurrences. One was worse than the other, depending on how you look at it. But when you're doing like a keynote presentation and you've got the battery pack mic on your hip and then you're wired up and you got it clipped on your lapel or whatever. If it's just a 1 hour thing, that's easy, right? Because they mic you and then they take it off. You're fine. When there's a break is when it's dangerous. Because there's when a break, you're still mic'd up, walking around talking to people. So I had one where I was speaking at a conference. I'm slowing down as I tell the story because I want to make sure I don't give any details of the folks that were there. But either way, I was outside the room talking to the leadership and getting some feedback in the break about how it went. And the person on the stage right before me was a notable political figure that people would know the name. This person did a terrible job at the session. Like, it was one of the most boring presentation. So it was a federal agency that I was presenting at. So they get up there and they presented. It was so bad. I got up and presented. Then I had the break. Well, during the break, my mic was still on, and this guy's having a secret conversation with me out in the hallway that the entire group of 500 federal agents all heard the negative feedback he had to give on the person that just went before me. That was embarrassing more so for him probably than me, but it's my fault. The other one, so then I started to think, okay, turn off the mic. Like, I got pretty accustomed to that. However, for those of you that ever get mic'd up at some point, the other one, without getting into too much detail, I did good. I turned the mic off, but forgot that even when the mic is off and not going through the room, it's still going to the AV guys in their headset. And so I had a full conversation about how much I couldn't stand the AV guy and how terrible he was. And he was listening to the entire conversation the whole time. So for some reason, my PowerPoint clicker didn't work the second half of that presentation, but somebody may have pulled the plug on me. So
Oh
anyway,
God,
be
Dave,
careful.
you're a terrible person.
I'm very bad. Yeah. Okay. So your second part, and I've had more,
We
man.
could have just done this, Johnny. We could have started with this embarrassing stories and just covered the whole like 45 minutes to an hour right there.
Seriously.
I got so many mistakes I've made. You learn, like, when you're in front of the audience and people, I used to have a terrible fear of public speaking. Like, I hated it. I'd throw up. Oh, terrible, terrible. And when I worked for Kohl's department stores, they had us do like a development day, and we had to go to the corporate office and do this like elevator pitch, and they video recorded us. And they had all your peers in the room and leadership in the room. And then everybody had a score sheet to score how well you did and what kind of feedback would they give on your present. I mean, I was so bad. I didn't know how to smile. It looked like I had a stroke. My hands were like, I didn't know what to do. I was swaying back and forth. I still have it. I might even have it right here. I do. It's right here. I still have it. I watch it once in a while. It's on a little CD. And I try to remember, like, on my anniversary at WZ every year to watch this clip, because it was so bad. And it just reminds me that, like, you can continue to get better in something. You just put yourself on stage. And so, yes, plenty of embarrassing moments on a stage for sure.
We need a copy of that
No,
disc.
that stays with me. Maybe someday. We'll see.
So if you ever get overly confident, Dave, you just have to play that CD and then you're set again.
Oh, not a problem. Right? I'm humbled all the time. That is no problem. I've had so many silly things on the stage. Interviews, I've had plenty. Like, I've interviewed the same person more than once and didn't realize I did. Like, I went through our introductory statement and got hey, you don't have to tell me who you are. You did this last time. I've had plenty of those. I had a guy eat his statement. So I did this interview.
Is that a literal statement?
Yes. So I got two quick examples here that I can share, both embarrassing. One, this is kind of embarrassing, but I did this interview. It was a sexual harassment case, and the guy was a Green Bay Packers fan. And the reason I say that is because at the time, it was right after, like, Brett Favre, for anybody that's listening, remembers Brett Favre had a little problem. He was, like, sending some pictures of himself to a reporter from the Jets. Anyway, this guy was a huge Packers fan, and we're talking about, he made some, like, inappropriate comments to some women at this store that he was at or whatever. So during the interview, we start talking about Brett Favre, and he's a Packers fan, and sometimes even Brett Favre did something stupid without really thinking it all the way through. It was wonderful, right? I felt like I did such a good job. He writes me a detailed handwritten statement, quotes on the inappropriate things that he said. He even gave me names of other people I could interview that would, like, corroborate his own admission. So I had my folder, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I just got this. And I don't know what happened, but by the time I, like, looked in my folder and closed it, this guy took the statement, crumpled it up, put it in his mouth. I don't know if he swallowed it or if I don't know what had happened to it. he says like F you in some way and then just got up and left. All like that. I could tell you any story right now. Nobody knows if it's true or not because the statement's gone. So I walked away like telling leadership, hey, I got this great admission, but there's no proof of anything. So it was just me in the room. I told that story in my job interview for WZ. To Dave Zulawski. He asked me, tell me about a bad interview moment. I told him that story. Dave does not remember this, but when I told him the story, he gets up in the middle of my job interview and leaves. And I'm like, okay, well, there goes that. And then he comes back in and had a couple of glasses for us with some beverages in it. And he said, cheers, same thing happened to me. And Dave shared a similar story. So that one, and then I was thinking about this because I didn't know what you guys were going to ask specifically, but I know you said something embarrassing. And so I have to just, if I got time for one quick little example here.
Oh, throw it out there, man.
We love embarrassing things, Dave. Please continue.
Yeah. So before I was in college, so I think I was working Sears at the time, but I also was doing security at a bar. So I say bouncer, but I don't look like it. So I'm just going to say security, right? It was a country music bar, usually. So on a Thursday night, I'm working this bar and I loved this. This was my favorite job in the world. The one night, there was a new dance club, we'll just say, that opened down the street. So a couple of the performers showed up at our like country bar and they were marketing
Performers.
Yeah, I'm using the appropriate.
I understand,
Johnny. So they were marketing their establishment for whatever, brand new place. Fine. So the next day, I got a call from my boss, and he said, hey, Dave, we're going to do a special event at the bar on Saturday or whatever it was going to be. But it's the people that are going to be there. We need somebody with professionalism that can be tactful. Like it's going to be kind of a sensitive thing. So I'm, of course, thinking it's this dance club is doing like a special event at the bar. And that's what he kind of alluded to. So, of course, I said yes very quickly. Like, you need a guy to run security for this event. I am your guy. So I was all excited. I told my friends about it. Like I couldn't wait. And so I get there and I see a lot of women parking and walking into the establishment, like our bar. And I'm like, this is weird. It's not the crowd I thought was going to be to see what was going to be here. And then I realized it was a male strip show that I was assigned to be the security director for that event. So it's like these Chippendales guys walking around that somehow was my job. Now, first of all, I'm disappointed. Secondly, I'm thinking these guys don't need me. They could all bench press me. I don't know what the heck I'm doing in there. But that was my first, like, I felt like I had this big gig I was going to be assigned to, and I wasn't curious enough to ask a couple questions and got there and it was completely different.
I'm sure you were looking forward to helping a few of them get through college and then.
Whatever. Listen, I'm a good listener.
I understand. Well, Dave Thompson, this has been a wonderful session. I can't thank you enough for joining us. I can't thank you enough for being candid. And I don't know about you, Tony, but I'm really looking forward to our continued partnership and looking forward to future episodes of the podcast.
Yeah,
thank you guys. It's fun. And I think, like I said, the partnership is just such a good fit because you guys are the same. Like you care so much. You both came from the industry, from being practitioners, and you care so much about making sure people are supported in the difficult jobs that they have. So I just think that partnership makes sense. And it's cool to be a part of this, part of the podcast. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Go Bills.
Thanks for listening to It's Your Loss, where we explore the strategies, stories, and data driving the future of loss prevention. This podcast is brought to you by ThinkLP, powering loss prevention for over 200 leading retailers and helping protect people and profits around the world. If you got value from today's episode, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube so you never miss an update. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow Tony Shepard and Johnny Custer on LinkedIn for more insights, stories from the field, and industry updates between episodes. We'll be back soon with more news, more strategy, and yes, probably another crazy loss prevention story or two. Until then, keep protecting people, securing profits, and try not to let it be your loss.